All right. Welcome, everybody, to our book club. We are going through The Self-Aware Leader by John Maxwell. Tonight, we're going through chapters 5 and 6. And this, I was just, saying that this book, this is my second time reading it, and it really kind of wrecked me the first time. This time I'm just getting some completely different stuff out of it. So I would just encourage that, all the stuff that we're reading, reread it later, because you'll get new things, you'll get fresh revelations, you'll be in a different season, you'll be in a different, not only a different season of life, but a different season of your leadership, a different season of your growth. And so different things just come, they'll stick out to you in different ways. So, but the first one, we're talking about listening and criticism tonight, two things that I think are probably some of the hardest things as a leader to have to deal with. As far as listening, this is one I've really, really, really had to learn and grow in personally, honestly, because I can talk all day. Listening to me, it was probably a few years ago that was brought to my attention that I probably listened to know how to respond more than I was actually listening to actually hear what people were saying and to hear their heart and to understand them better. And the intention wasn't bad. The intention was to have good, strong dialogue, but really I felt like it came down to like an insecurity in myself, to where it was like, I need to make sure that what I have to say next is like, worthy of this conversation, and that it actually adds something and adds value or whatever. And so I love when he talks about like, just being self-aware and knowing what your weaknesses are, and just being true to yourself and just being genuine with yourself. And like there's a whole level of relaxation and like comfort that comes with that you're like, I don't have to listen to know what to say next. I could literally, if I don't know what to say, I could literally say to someone, wow, I have no idea how to respond to that. Can you tell me more about that? Those are little things that you can say and do to take the pressure off yourself when it comes to listening. You don't have to always have the best word next. There's a lot of times I'm in coaching, and I feel like we do this a lot in coaching, because you always want to be, you always want to be affirming them. You always want to be encouraging them and leading them in the right way. You want to say the right things and do the right things, but sometimes you just don't know what to say, right? Like we'll be on coaching calls. We don't know what to say. We have no idea how to fix their problem. And turns out the more that you ask them to just keep talking, they'll eventually find the problem on their own, and you didn't even have to do anything. And afterwards they're like, thank you so much. You're like, well, I didn't really do much. I just really listened and dug and asked more questions. And, I really didn't know where we were going with this, but you were able to come up with a solution on your own. And so a lot of times that listening can be way more effective than trying to have an answer or trying to have the perfect thing to say or trying to relate. Y'all, we don't have to relate to everything everybody says. I know that our heart a lot of times is to relate and make them feel like they're not alone in that. A lot of times that can come up as a trying to one up them. It can come across as, you're kind of self-absorbed. This is, again, something I had to learn, that you're self-absorbed and try to like take it back to yourself. You don't always have to relate. You don't always have to give your side of the story. Just listen, ask a lot of questions. They'll ask if they want to hear your side of it. If they want to hear that you have something to add, they'll ask. They will ask, have you ever been through something like this? Like, what did you do? And then that's your opportunity to offer that. But in the meantime, just listen to what people have to say. Also, something that dawned on me this time around was when they're talking about, he said he made a big L in the middle of his, or at the corner of his page, so that he would remind himself to listen. And then he made two L's that remind him to look and listen. And I think that listening is a big part of it, but that look and listen really makes a difference. I'll say that even, leading calls, like I was just talking about with people, whoever's the person that the speaker is looking at, when you're looking at them, they feel like you're listening, like you're engaged, like you actually care about what they're saying. When you're on like a team call or a Zoom call or whatever, when we do our team huddles, the people that have their cameras on and they're looking at me and they're engaged in what I'm saying, and they're not over here doing something else, and I get that sometimes you've got other things that you're trying to juggle, and that's fine. But when, as a general rule, try to be looking at people when you're listening, because you really will absorb more than you think you will. People can't multitask as much as they think they can. I think a lot of us, even end of the month tonight. I don't know how many of you are trying to also send messages while you're on book club. I don't know. But if you are, like, I want to challenge you to just take the few minutes to just be present right here and listen and show your team that you're actively listening and that you're here for the long run. And then once book club is done, you can pick up your messages and keep going with what you were doing, right? So try not to multitask when you're doing things that are where you really have to listen. Because like I said, we can't multitask as much as we think we can. And then, notice how other people listen. Like when you're on a Zoom call, for instance, I keep going back to Zoom, but honestly, is that not a lot of how we communicate nowadays? So with Zoom, for instance, I'll come in here and my husband's Zoom calls, they're all cameras off, they're all doing something else, but they're able to have effective meetings that way. Okay. To me, I'm like, I could not be on a call where everyone's cameras are off and no one's looking at anybody and we're all just talking to pictures. Like I could not, I couldn't do that. So read your room when you are with other people. Like if everybody else is camera on and looking and engaging, be camera on and looking and engaging. If, you're down here, like I used to, for instance, I used to doodle while I listened. And that was my big, excuse is, well, it helps me it keeps me listening. It keeps me focused if I doodle. Well, it tells everybody else that I'm not listening, that I'm not paying attention. Cause I know like sometimes when I'm an eye contact girl. So if people aren't giving me eye contact, I'm like, are you even listening to what I'm saying? How many times we do that when people are like on their phones, when you're trying to talk to them, and you're like, are you even listening to what I'm trying to say? So make sure that you're looking and you're actively listening in that way. We can't really multitask. You can't listen fully while you're doing other things. With my kids, I expect them, there's times where I'm on my phone trying to get work done and they're talking to me. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. And then later on they're doing things and I'm like, I'm talking to you. Can you look at me? This actually happened the other day. And I got super convicted because I'm like, here I'm expecting something from them that I just was not giving them, a half hour ago when I was trying to do other things and weren't listening to them. And I'm like, can you look at me and pay attention and listen to what I have to say? So keep that in mind as like, model what that good listening looks like if you're trying to teach people around you how to also be good listeners. This is also how you can lead, is teaching people how to listen in you being an active and effective listener. What is it? Page 56 is what I wrote down here. Oh, where he talks about, he read a study that you only hear half of what's being said, listen to half of what you hear, understand half of that, believe half of that, remember only half of that. I mean, gosh, we'll be on these calls, right? You're on a team call and somebody has this amazing knock it out of the park team call and you get off and there's so many nuggets, but how many do you actually remember? You remember like 3 good ones, right? Even if the whole call is fire, 3 things will stand out to you. So this is another reason why you have to be an active listener, but listen to things more than once. Listen, like go back and rewatch team calls. If something really spoke to you, go back and rewatch it. Even if you did watch it the first time and took great notes, watch it again. If you've read a great book, go read it again. Like listening and understanding and believing and all those things, it takes more effort than just hearing it one time, because I tend to believe that this is truer than we even think, because I know for me, when I'm listening to people talk, I probably really hear half of what they say, understand half of that, believe half of that. So, make sure that you're really effectively listening. And if you are not, go back and ask questions again so you can understand better. It's okay to ask questions. That is part of being an active listener, is knowing when you didn't hear something and going back and be like, can you explain this one more time? I'm trying to understand this better. I want to know this fully. I want to make sure that I'm hearing everything that you're saying. You want people to follow you and respect you. Tell them that you didn't understand what they said and you want to. So can they, help you understand? That will build trust in a relationship because they'll know that you're actually invested in what they have to say. Yes, rewatch team calls and take those notes. It's so important. To be worthy of the responsibility of leadership, you need to be, he says, you need to have insight into the human heart. You have to know your people and love your people, and you have to know them on a level where we always mess this up. I feel like we repeat this on every call and everybody messes up. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So that's another part of the active listening, is make sure that you're listening to their hearts and their dreams and their visions, their why, all of that, so you can pour into them effectively. Because you really, really can't lead them well if you don't know where they're trying to go. You have to have a good idea of where they're going and a good idea of what their heart is and what's going to help them get there, because their perspectives aren't the same as yours. Their life circumstances aren't the same as yours. Their mindsets are not the same as yours. And so it's going to take a different avenue for them to go from their point A to point B than it would take you to go from their point A to point B. So you have to know their heart. You have to know a lot about them to lead people effectively so that you can help them go where they're trying to go. The part that convicted me, where he says, if you're not listening to your team, they'll go and find somebody who will. And what does that look like? That looks like, gosh, well, I'm burnt out and I'm tired. And this is something I will say as a leader, you need to be aware of, is like when your team is feeling burnt out, when your team is feeling discouraged, when your team is feeling, when they're feeling those things, you need to be aware of yourself enough and aware of them enough to know when to see that happening and recognize that and be able to talk to them about it and give them a space where they feel safe with those feelings and those emotions and be able to process that with you, because you can easily help them through those things, but they need a safe place to be able to talk through those things. So another part of being an effective listener is just being a safe space. He talks about that. And so, you don't want them to go and find somebody else who will listen to their problems, right? Because it's probably gonna be someone talking them out of being on your team, honestly. So make sure that you're really listening to your team and pouring into them when they have those concerns too. Not everything is always butterflies and rainbows. And I feel like that's what he was trying to get at in a couple spots here. It's like a lot of times it's going to be things that are hard for you to hear and hard for you to have to listen to, but be ready to hear those things. Be ready to take that, be that safe space for your people. And then I'm just going to jump into criticism because I'm going a little bit long here. I had to just giggle at the Moses part because, like I said, our team is studying Moses right now, and we're going through Exodus. And so we've been talking a lot about how, Moses had to be so strong leading all these big whiners that are just whining and complaining the whole time. And I was writing in here, Moses is such a great transition, I think, from listening into criticism too, because he was the ultimate listener. He heard instructions very clearly, followed instructions. God was so specific in Exodus. If you've read Exodus, he is so specific with instructions, and he carried them out exactly the way they needed to be carried out. The building of the tabernacle and the ark and the priest's clothing and all of those things, it's so specific, and it took great listening. And I think about how overwhelmed Moses had to have felt hearing this and knowing what a big task was in front of him. And then everybody's whining and they're all criticizing him. And I can't imagine how that must have felt in that moment. And yet he was able to be a strong leader and listen to his people, but know the goal and where they were going so that he could lead them out of their own mindsets, out of their own junk, and still keep them on track. I loved when he said, I bet if he would do it again, he'd probably tell Pharaoh not to let all the people go. Maybe not everybody. You can keep a couple of those little whiners back. I love his questions to ask when you're getting criticized. I think it's important to keep in mind that, yes, it's important to take criticism, but it is also important to note when it's not, when it is just, a personal. He talks about your personal attack criticism and then your leadership role criticism. And when it's a personal, something that's not constructive, you don't need to be a doormat to people. So keep that in mind, is what's constructive, and know to take the high road. But he says you still need to take that criticism, or not take it. You still need to, what's the words he used? You still need to be able to know how to handle it, basically, is what he's saying. Take the high road, be somebody who can, meet them where they're at and have a solid conversation about it. Be self-aware and confident in yourself enough to know where you're going, to, not doubt your opinions and what you're doing more than you're doubting theirs. Did I say that the right way? Yeah. Anyways, but make sure that you're strong in where you're going so that you can handle that and know how to walk through that and take that high road. But keep in mind that high road a lot, I think sometimes we think it's well, that is just not constructive to me, so I'm going to take the high road and just pretend that didn't even happen. Well, sometimes it is something that you need to listen to, and there might be little nuggets in there. So one thing I've really tried to do I will say there's something I went through a while ago, and one thing that it was hard on me, but it really helped me to evaluate circumstances when I'm going through things and see, like, is this something that what could I have done differently in this? Because there's almost always something that you could have done differently, or you could have said differently, or you could have listened differently to know what their hearts and their intentions were before you said something, or whatever, you know what I mean? So before you just write off criticism, ask yourself, like, what is it that I could have done differently? Yeah. And then I think, just going off the criticism, that was really, to me, it was like, that's challenging me to think before I offer any feedback. I'm going to call it feedback, not criticism, to somebody as well. Is like, am I just trying to criticize them in their position? Am I trying to criticize them? Am I trying to get to a resolution? Am I trying to just cause friction? Like, what's my heart and my intention behind it? And then also, like, am I offering kindness and edification behind it? Or is this just like a personal attack with no solution? So keep that in mind when you're also offering that criticism. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to, I know we got started a little bit late here, but I don't want to draw it out too late. So I'll go ahead and open it up to you guys. Anything specific that stood out to you guys at all?
Before we backtrack too much, just on the comment that you just made about, like, are we looking for resolutions or solutions? I think it was in one of our other books or some talk we did where before you go to someone with a criticism of some sort, you should have 3 solutions ready in your mind that you're able to offer. And that actually, I think, probably helps slow down a lot of criticism. Like, if you can't, or if I can't think of 3 possible solutions, then I probably shouldn't open my mouth about the negative part of it until I'm ready to be part of helping solve the problem, or willing to, like, put in the time for it, willing to front some money for it, willing to, you know, help be a part of solving it. So just a little bit on what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I do remember that. What book was that? I do remember that, though. And I think a lot of times too is you can come up with a solution. If you come up with those 3 solutions, a lot of times you realize that you're a big part of one of those solutions. And so if you would just change those things, a lot of times that friction will go away, or at least subside, That's good.
So I really liked the part where he was listing off the things that he had discovered about himself. Um, because a lot of them I was like, oh crap, like I gotta add those to the list of things, right? But for me, a lot of those things, those are like the things for me that are strengths, but that I have a weakness like within the strength, if that makes sense, like where he was talking about that. And I realized from like the listening part, when then he listed off his things later, he said that he works through problems really quickly and not everyone else does. And I feel like I do that. Like if you say, Justina, I have this going on, I probably thought of like 10 ideas of what to do for it before you finish telling me what was wrong. And for me, like I'm like weeding out like what can I do and will that be a good option? Yes, no, like in my head as the person is talking. And I realized that if I'm like, oh well, like here's like 3 good choices because I've weeded them out, like the moment you're done, it's probably not always making people feel heard or like I have fully listened to them. And I think it's because my husband always tells me that he'll be like, you like say something and then like 2 seconds later you're like moving on to the next thing, or like, oh, I already figured that out. And like, so I realized that while that's a strength, like being able to not dwell on things and work through things really quickly, at the same time, that can be a weakness if I'm not making like people feel heard or making them feel like maybe like how you said, like some people just need to talk through it and they come to the answer on their own. I realize that sometimes with my team, I'm like, oh, well, like here's the solution, or here's like 3 possible solutions. And I don't always necessarily make them or allow them to go through that process of figuring it out. So that was like a big thing for me from these chapters.
It's so good. It reminds me of like when I'm with my husband and I'm like talking about something that I'm hurt about or whatever, and he like starts telling me how to fix. I'm like, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. Stop trying to fix it for me. That's what that reminds me of.
So me, he'll be
Yeah.
like, so what do I need to do? And I'm like, nothing, just shush and let me tell you all the stuff. Like,
I just want to vent. I know.
yeah. Oh.
Poor boys.
So the biggest thing to me that stuck out was accepting yourself. On page 73, it talks about accepting yourself. And that really just kind of struck a chord with me because I feel like I have gone most of my life not really knowing who I was. And I feel like now that I'm almost 40, I'm starting to kind of, through self-development and things like that, like all this has been so helpful and just trying to figure out who I am and not depend on what other people or what they think I am. And, you know, self-discovery and discovering who you are is a challenge. I think that a lot of people deal with, you know, and then we talk about niches and things like that. It's like, okay, but who am I? Like, what is my niche, you know, and just things like that. But, you know, that was the thing that stuck out to me the most, is just accepting who you are and just coming from a place of knowing who you are and just being real and authentic. That's been a challenge for me in a lot of areas. And that's something that I'm working on currently and really enjoying digging into.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Ash. I can see that with you, like I work with you one-on-one a little bit more than everyone else here, but I would say it's probably the same, I think, for a lot of us, you know, as like part of accepting who you are is having to accept your weaknesses. That's hard, you know, that takes some pride swallowing and sometimes failing forward in front of people and realizing what your weaknesses are publicly or whatever, you know, when you come and lead the entire wrong chapter of book club, you know, things like that. It's no big deal. We accept our weaknesses, we move on. It's not a big deal. You're right, though. It's a lot of this personal growth, though, that helps you to discover who you are, really, though. Sorry, I just cut someone off.
That's okay. I loved where, Ash, you are correct, because I, at 50 some, have just learned and I'm learning. And with all of these books and growing, it is a huge thing on how to be able to talk to somebody on your team, how to help them walk through, like Justina said, you know, but I wasn't the person trying to solve. I'm like, I have to sit there and listen again. I'm like, okay, when do I respond back? Because I wasn't sure. It's getting easier, but I just love how I have learned right alongside of my team. And it's been amazing just learning how to teach them, learning how to walk them through their problems and help them solve their own issues. So I don't have to all the time, which is really good because then I have somebody else I can work with too as well. So that's a big blessing for me, learning with them. So, and I just love all these books, you know, it's just amazing.
Yes, I totally agree. And like how duplicatable to take the pressure off them to have all the answers when they need to coach their people, you know, just no, it's just asking questions and just loving people well is really all coaching really is. I love that you're learning alongside your team. That's going to duplicate so beautifully.
My favorite chapter out of the two was definitely the listening chapter, because I feel like that's something that I struggle with. I like to talk a lot, and this company has definitely taught me, like, that's one of the best things I've learned is like how to listen more to people. And when I was reading it, I wasn't just thinking about like leading like workers on my team, but also like customers on my team. And I kind of like thought back to like a lot of the events and how when I was first like talking to people at events, I was just wanting to like word vomit all over them and tell them all about the products and just all these things. And I just found out that like as I started listening more and just like asking questions and getting them to talk more, it just went so much better, and they were willing to share so much more than I ever thought that they were willing to share. And I just, just simple, short questions and, just listening. And so I think that that's one of the things that I was kind of reflecting on as I was reading that chapter.
So good, Canada. I think a lot of us kind of have that where it's like we don't realize how much people actually do want to share, right? I do feel like we're coming out of a generation, maybe it's a season of generation of where people just didn't share much, and it was almost like rude to ask or to pry or whatever. And you like didn't want to ask anything that seemed too personal. And I think we're moving into a new season where people are like, for the love, ask me about myself. I want to talk about myself. People want to be asked those questions, but we're afraid to pry because we feel like it's, like you said, they don't want to share as much, but I feel like people do. We just don't give them the opportunity. Thanks for sharing. That was good.
I was thinking very similar to what you just shared, Canada, in regards to like potential customers. I think I was thinking about things that people might get intimidated with doing in our business. So for starting out, you might be intimidated with talking to customers. It might turn into like down the road where you're intimidated with talking to like a business potential, whatever. And it's like the whole listening thing, just like you said, kind of takes the pressure right off where you don't have to say the magic thing, right? And I don't remember where he said it in the chapter, but he basically laid out why it's so effective, because listening builds trust. And the whole point of our business, like we want people to trust us with their health, with doing the business, whatever. And so if you want to continue to build influence and have more people to lead, you need more people to trust you. And so you just need to grow in listening. Like, I feel like that, I think everybody's always thinking like, how do I grow in influence? Like a super simple way is just to listen more. And I think I don't think that's something that came naturally for me either. I don't know if it comes natural for anybody. Like, I feel like there's maybe one or two people in my life where I'm like, you're a great listener, but I think it's probably something that was developed because I think we are selfish by nature, probably, right? But the easiest way for me to learn that was to just listen to what my sponsor was saying all the time and try to do as many things side by side with her. So if you feel like that's something that you want to grow in, I think it's a really wise idea to make sure that you are doing things side by side and hearing over and over. Like I remember having Jaime get on, I can't even tell you how many calls with me, like for potentials for the business or whatever. Or even like early on with signing up a customer. Like I remember my first 4 customers, I had her do it with me because it's like, I want to listen to how you're saying these things, how you're asking questions. I think that makes a world of difference. And then, like you said, Natalie, that's so duplicatable because it's like, it takes the pressure off. You get kind of a couple key questions and there you go. So anyway.
And to kind of tie that back around to what we were saying earlier, when you say the more you listen to Jaime, you'd probably hear something a little bit different next time that you didn't notice last time. So it's like that repetitive listening, you start to like really, it all starts to sink in. That's so good, Leah.
I really like the part about criticism. I'm a people pleaser, so hearing criticism is kind of like, ugh, but like, I mean, most people don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear negative things or things that you have to change, but just the more you take it with grace, like he said, the better it's going to be for you and you're going to grow from it. And I just like how he broke it down to be able to take it with grace instead of taking immediate offense. Like, obviously, you want to take it personally because it is about you, but you don't want to take offense to it. Most of the time, they're not meaning it to, hurt your feelings. They're just trying to tell you something. Like he said about the person telling him that he wasn't a good listener. Well, he never would have been able to fix that in himself if she hadn't spoken up and said something. So I'm getting better about, being like, okay, tell me what these things are so that I can work on them and be a better person for it myself.
I think that's good. And I think, modeling how to handle feedback and criticism helps you to be able to give that back, right? For you to do the same, because you're building that trust that we talked about. So, but yeah, I'm with you, girl. I don't want to hear it. It doesn't feel good, but it usually needs to be said. And then you usually do feel better afterwards, because then you even in our businesses, right? If Emily gives me an effective form of, I hate calling it criticism in this manner, more feedback, about things that she notices that I'm doing that I could be doing better or whatever. It's like, I don't want to hear it. And it sucks hearing it in the moment, but afterwards I actually feel a little bit better, because I'm like, oh, that's something that I can change. I'm not stuck. Like, that's something I can actually change and move forward and grow in, and, actually develop more as a leader. I'm with you, girl. People pleasers.
I found on the bottom of 64 where the question is asked, do I spend more time talking or listening to my team members? Just that reminder again, how important it is to, for me to reach out to people with no agenda other than to check in. Just not, how come your sub's off? Or don't you want to make that 100 PV? Or do you have a friend that wants to? Literally nothing other than to build that friendship level and build the trust, and in time then the influence, and just putting, literally making a schedule of when to reach out, and make myself not ask about anything related to plexus, just to show that I genuinely, and I hope that they would come from that heart and be taken that way. And then regard to criticism, something that I have tried to do recently, if there's someone that is all of a sudden not taking products, and I just again yesterday, to write to them and just ask them to help me learn, and to if there's anything that they felt they would have liked to have seen happen differently, or anything. I don't know, just asking them to help me learn. We're always trying to improve, always trying to learn. Is there anything that you'd be willing to share that would help us improve? And then be open to whatever might follow from that. But that's the only way we get better, right? Is to learn. So trying to do that more.
I respect that a lot. That takes, you're kind of you're doing both of these things. You're basically asking for feedback and then being forced to listen to what that is. So I think I respect that a lot. And I think that, like you said, that's the way you're going to grow. That's the way you're going to know how to handle things differently. And, yeah, like you said, gotta be ready in case it's something you don't want to hear. I love that. Did anyone answer that question at all? Go through and actually answer that? It was on the bottom of 64. Do I spend more time talking or listening to my team members? Why? What would happen if I spent more time asking questions and listening? How can I start doing that beginning today? I went through that, and I actually found that for me, if I am rambling and I'm not listening, I've noticed a pattern for me is it's a sign of unpreparedness on my part, if that makes sense. I didn't take the time to prepare to know them and think through their circumstances or what they're going through, or I don't know. I just feel, I've noticed it's a level of me being unprepared. I just start rambling because I didn't come prepared to this conversation. I don't really know what to say, so I'm just going to ramble on, and I tend to not really listen in those but if I'm able to, I came prepared and I offer a few valuable things, and now I just want to listen to what they have to say. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but that's just kind of where my head went when I was answering this question. Anyone have anything else before we?
That right there, Natalie, that you just said made me think about a call that I had yesterday with a lady just to talk to her about things. And I'm talking, and I'm whoop, wait a minute, I gotta go back to my notes and my list of questions because I was just like going here. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, I got to go back over here. So yeah, it can be very easy, if you're not prepared. But I was prepared, but I lost. Butterfly, I guess.
Hilarious. I'll just ramble. I have no problems talking, so I'll just ramble if I'm not prepared. So if you ever hear me rambling, I probably came unprepared.
I think that question on the bottom of 64 is a good one to kind of bring back continually throughout your business, because you evolve and change as things happen. Like, just looking back, I think, especially with potentials, like I was, wanting to share so much, and like Canada was saying, like kind of like vomit plexus on them, that I would like quickly recommend things or quickly tell them about specific products instead of waiting and asking more questions and digging a little deeper so that I could probably be more insightful and even more helpful with them. So then you're getting the best of both worlds. You are listening to them and gathering the information, but then you're also able to provide them with the different things and giving them the best customer care that you can.
It's really good, Jess. And go into those conversations with a mindset that you have no idea what their end actually is. Like, I think a lot of times we make up these scenarios in our head, even if we do it subconsciously, of like why they turned off their sub or why they haven't been posting about the business like they said they would. Like, we make up these scenarios in our heads. So we already go like on the defense and like we already know what's happening. It turns out a lot of times that's not even the case. We really don't know what's going on. So, I think a big part of listening too in this scenario is like, you got to like blank slate, go in truly prepared to listen to what they have to say. Yes, kind of putting our own perceptions on them. Exactly. Anybody else? All right. It's almost quarter after, and we have end of the month that I know a lot of us are still trying to push for. So I'm going to let everybody go. You guys push hard because there's a big thing coming tomorrow, and everything you do this month counts. So make sure that you guys are putting the work in, push hard, close the month strong. You guys are awesome, and I will see you next week.